Senator Lyons. Senator Ludlam, then Senator Back.
Brilliant, thank you. Staying with Western Australia and staying with this project. I think Senator Lyons has cleared up why there are different amounts of money quoted in different places. I'm still trying to separate out for myself how much of the funding, this is Perth Freight Link, was the first time that I'd seen works all the way from Perth Airport on the other side of kind of Kenwick, all the way through to Fremantle, conceived of as a single project. Works are obviously, as you're aware, well underway around the airport, around that so-called Gateway project. Is any of the funding appropriations that we're discussing so far relate to those existing works, or have you netted that out of the $925 million indicative?
Senator, that's not, the 925 doesn't include the works at Gateway or the works on the Tonkin grade separations. Okay,
so all right, good. For the purposes of this conversation, then we can set that aside. I mean, that's committed. That's already underway. That was a ALP initiative from a couple of years ago.
Turn the shovel, we'll see.
Making a horrendous mess of the urban bushland around the airport. But
let me tell you, it's a long time coming.
We will set that aside. So let's talk about, of the 925, is it possible to separate out how much of that is a Commonwealth commitment specifically to that stretch of freeway through the Beeliar wetlands between Kwinana Freeway and Stock Road? We'll leave aside the rest of the high street stuff for a second.
We'll be able to provide the breakdown. I think I've taken that on notice.
You already did. Yeah, but you took it on notice not for October but for later this afternoon, if that's possible.
Yeah, I said that we'll try to get that back.
Great, that should be fairly black and white. Yeah. You are aware that this is under appeal in the WA Environmental Protection Agency at the moment, and that it has not yet been assessed for acknowledged Commonwealth environmental matters. You're aware of those two things?
Senator, yes, we are.
So, should people bother to participate in environmental and heritage assessment given you've already made your minds up? Or not you, this has been landed on your heads actually, but that the government's made its mind up, utterly preempting state and Commonwealth environmental impact assessment. Why should people bother to participate in those processes?
Well, Senator, with every project that is funded by either the state or the Australian government, the environmental approval process is an integral part of the project.
Can I just pull you up there? It's an environmental assessment process, not an environmental approval process. Do you just assume that everything's going to go ahead irrespective of what those regulators come up with?
No, thank you, Senator, for clarifying. So, environmental assessment is a part of all projects. Certainly, there's an opportunity with the project. I'm sorry, Senator. Certainly, Senator, there's an opportunity with the project to minimise any environmental impacts, and that will impact on the final design and outcome of the project.
You are aware that both under state and Commonwealth environmental law, it's possible for the regulators to come back and say this project shouldn't proceed. On what basis have you come to the view that those regulators won't do that in this instance?
We haven't formed any view about the outcome of those environmental
assessment
processes.
There's money committed in the forward estimates to this project going ahead. You've absolutely formed a view.
That's right, Senator, but it's common practice to make commitments such as that, and it is pending, obviously, all of the necessary planning approvals to take place.
You don't have planning approvals, we don't really have a business case, nobody's been able to see the cost-benefit ratio, but we're just assuming that this thing's going ahead no matter what.
Well, I think, as Mr Jaggers has indicated, clearly there will need to be planning and environmental assessment processes undertaken.
And what if they find that the project shouldn't proceed?
Then the government will need to reconsider it. Both governments would need to reconsider its approach to this project as they do with any project.
Do you think it's a little bit strange for funding to be committed before those processes have run their course?
No, in many ways, processes don't commence often until such time as governments do make commitments to projects. Like with any project, unless there is a commitment to proceed and funding allocated, no one would enter into an environmental assessment process. The funding is simply not there.
That's not been the case in my experience. Projects can be green-lighted and move forward and assessed before funding is committed. If we were running an honest process here where you genuinely believe that the environmental or heritage regulators might say this is unacceptable, then we'd have something to talk about. But quite clearly you see it as a fait accompli. Not you, again, the government itself. It's a political decision.
I don't think the government would see it that way at all, Senator. The government will always meet the legislative requirements of the environmental assessment, both Western Australia and the Commonwealth assessment process.
Were you consulted before the announcement was made of a couple of weeks ago that this project would be proceeding, and again, referring specifically to the kind of western end, leaving the gateway stuff aside. Were you consulted before this was picked up from obscurity and made a major government announcement?
The government worked on the issue with the Western Australian officials and provided advice to the government in relation to the project, yes, Senator.
So when you said the government earlier,
Sorry, the department.
who did you mean?
The department did work through this project in the lead up to the budget, yes, Senator.
Okay, but what's the cause and effect? Were you asked if this project was viable, or were you told that it is going to go ahead and then that you were instructed to work with the West Australian authorities?
We'd been working with the West Australian government for some time on projects.
They'd ruled it out. They'd said it wasn't proceeding.
This project was identified, and we undertook some preliminary work in the lead up to the budget and provided advice to the government.
Is it your understanding that the segment of freeway that runs through the Beeliar wetlands is proposed to be elevated, or will it be will it run across the terrain?
I think details are still to be. I'll just check with my officers as to how much detail we have.
Yeah, no, Senator, we haven't, we don't have an answer to that question at this point in time.
That's mad. If it's elevated, it will be vastly more expensive. So how do you come up with cost estimates if you don't know whether it's on the ground or up in the air? There's no way you can come up with any kind of project cost unless you know that basic detail.
You put a toll on there for the truckies.
I'm going to get to the toll.
Oh, okay.
But let's just talk about the project itself. If you put it on pylons, it costs you more than twice as much. So is it up in the air or is it on the ground?
$1 billion.
The truckies?
Well, I've got no problem. It goes through onto the supermarket shelves, mate.
I think there are indicative proposals in terms of how the design would operate, Senator. That has formed the basis of the advice from Western Australia about the costing.
Indicative proposals put this as an elevated freeway, or is it on the
Senator, I would have to come back to you with the details on that, on the costing.
Can we do that before we rise at 3?
We'll seek to do that, Senator.
It's a really basic project detail.
Yeah, no, I understand.
You're with me on that?
We've worked off the basis of cost estimates prepared by the State of Western Australia.
Are you aware that this project is being strongly contested for a period of more than 20 years by local residents? That it's a real flashpoint, it's going to be a very big issue?
I'm certainly aware there has been significant concerns about various routes in this area in the past, yes.
They have. That in fact the project was taken off the books by the state Labor government. It was never removed from the Metropolitan Region scheme, but it was formally cancelled. And that it was originally meant to link up with the Fremantle Eastern Bypass. You're aware of that kind of project history? It goes back quite a way?
Yes, Senator.
Yes.
You are. And that the Fremantle Eastern Bypass has been deleted from the city's statutory planning. So the Row 8 link effectively doesn't go to where it was intended to go. It goes nowhere.
Well, Senator, it goes to Stock Road.
We'll talk about Stock Road in a sec. This is the largest number of appeals to an EPA process in the history of environmental regulation in WA. Were you aware of that? There's huge community opposition to this proposal that you are bankrolling before you've seen the environmental impact assessment documents finalised. Again, I refer not to you because I understand you're not the decision maker, but that is what you're involved in.
Not familiar with the appeal process to date, Senator.
Do you think it might be useful to become familiar with it?
Well, we'll work through those details as we prepare the project proposal, Senator.
Is the department in contact with the West Australian EPA or the Department of Environment regulators on this, or are we operating in silos? For
Our work is with the WA Department of Transport and Main Roads officials. It is for them to manage relationships with other WA state agencies.
Okay, so I guess then consequently it would be in your remit to liaise with your Commonwealth counterparts in the Department of Environment. Have you been doing that?
We haven't to this point. We're certainly aware of the environmental assessment requirements, but I don't think we've had any formal discussions. I'll just check with my officers.
Well, how can you punt it to the WA department to contact the EPA and then say that you haven't been in contact with Commonwealth regulators on the same project? That's a bit odd.
Well, Senator, it's a matter for the West Australian government to liaise with.
You're bankrolling this project to the tune of nearly $1 billion. It's squarely a matter for you guys.
The usual practice is, Senator, that the state government that is a proponent of the project and the deliverer of the project seeks and gains all necessary approvals for the project.
Okay, so there's no plans for you guys to liaise in future. Recognising also it's not being formally assessed by Department of the Environment yet, so that would have been a good answer as well. It hasn't started. but you're going to leave all of that to the proponents, to the West Australian government, even though they'd actually ruled it out before you came up, before the Commonwealth came up with the funding.
We will work with the West Australian officials on this project.
Okay, but not Commonwealth ones.
Well, as we need to, we'll liaise with our Commonwealth colleagues.
Yeah, there's no, as Senator Lyons reminds us, there's no money for this in the West Australian budget for the forward estimates.
Well, I'd say, as I've answered to previous questions, that's a matter with Western Australia as they respond to the government's proposed program.
Credit rating. But their priorities all wrong.
Yeah, and this state is now subjected to more than $25 billion in net debt. So let's talk about the cost-benefit analysis that was conducted into the project. Has the department seen that? The public hasn't, but have you?
Senator, we've seen some information from West Australia about different components of the project.
I asked you a really specific question about benefit cost analysis, or the CBA that's been done. Has the department seen that?
We've seen the analysis of the sections that have had benefit cost analysis done. So we've seen some work on the Row 8 component of the project, the Row Highway extension.
I'll get to High Street and Stock Road in a sec because there's some fairly serious issues for local residents there as well. So the state government hasn't released the whole document to you. Have you asked them for the whole document, or are they refusing to disclose it to you as they are to the public?
No, Senator, we've seen documentation from Western Australia.
You said some of it. You made it sound like it was quite partial.
The sum was in reference to some parts of the project.
Have you seen the cost-benefit analysis that was conducted?
There hasn't been a cost-benefit analysis on the whole of the Perth Freight Link project as a single project.
Has there been one conducted into the section of freeway that's Row 8 through the Beeliar wetland?
Yes, Senator, there has by the West Australian Government, and we have seen that.
You have?
Yes.
Okay. Can you release it to the public, please?
Well, the release of that documentation is a matter for West Australia in consultation with us.
You know, you're aware that they've refused to. Public can't see it.
I wasn't aware that they'd been asked and refused, Senator, sorry.
Okay, well, that's something. We're both learning things today. The Transport Minister said in the press release, I think of about a week or so, that releasing that document may negatively impact discussions with the private sector. You have seen the document, so you're ahead of us. Apparently, and this is Minister Jamie Briggs must have also seen it, he says the Row 8 project would generate more than $5 of economic benefit for every dollar spent. Is that consistent with what you've seen?
That is consistent with what we've seen, Senator.
Now when, I think it was Senator Conroy was talking before about the benefit cost ratios for some of the projects in Victoria, East-West Link in particular being at 0.5, is that just clarify this for me, that's for every dollar spent you get 50 cents in economic benefit. Is that what that would have meant for that Victorian project?
Well, I don't think. Well, I'm not commenting on that figure. I haven't seen that figure. In
okay, maybe I'm distracting us unnecessarily. But in terms of the benefit cost ratio, that is saying effectively it's a 1 to 5. We're generating 5 times the economic benefits for every dollar we spend on this freeway.
That's what it would mean, Senator.
Okay. And we have to just trust you on that, or not trust you. You're not permitted to release it by the West Australians. So we just have to trust that modelling is sound. Have you taken a look at the underlying assumptions behind that 1 to 5 ratio that's been presented?
We haven't completed a detailed analysis of the benefit cost ratio that was developed.
You haven't, but you've committed nearly $1 billion to the project and you haven't read it yet.
Yeah, I think as the Secretary mentioned, there is still more work to happen on the project, and there will be a fuller business case developed as well, Senator.
How much does that study rely on economic benefits of time savings as a factor?
Usually it's a significant factor in a benefit cost ratio for a transport project. I don't know exactly what proportion in this case, but it's usually quite a high proportion is down to travel time savings. Yeah.
And that's effectively monetising. If I spent 6 minutes less on my journey, that 6 minutes is worth a certain amount of money. You tab that up over 30 years and it can be huge amounts of money.
And then those benefits are then discounted at a particular rate, Senator, usually either 4% or 7%.
Yeah. Did the CBA that you saw measure the benefits, or the costs, I guess, to be fair, of the ecological services that are provided by a wetland, either just through the 5 kilometre corridor, just again sticking with Row 8? Did it monetise the benefits of the native vegetation as a carbon sink or as a groundwater recharge area on surrounding land values as a place of recreation that would be obliterated by this thing, or the lost heritage values to local Aboriginal mobs? Was that factored in?
Senator, I'm not aware. I don't know, Senator.
Any of those things?
I don't know.
Could you take that on notice?
Yes,
We'll check that, Senator, and come back to you.
That'd be great. Because otherwise, all we're hearing about is the benefits and none of the costs, and I would strongly dispute the way some of those benefits are calculated anyway. But it's all top secret national security matter, so we're all working in the dark. But anything at all that you can provide us, since you have access to the document, would be great. Actually, it's $5.20, not $5 for every dollar invested. So, let's get to the question of the toll. My understanding is that some traffic modelling has been done for the project, basic traffic modelling to justify its existence at all. Is that correct?
Certainly West Australia has done traffic modelling, and we've done some traffic modelling ourselves, Senator.
Oh, you do that independently?
Yes, we do.
That's useful to know. Can you release what the Commonwealth has done, or is that national security secret as well?
Well, it's still a work in progress, Senator.
We're still undertaking it.
We'll take that on notice, Senator.
Yeah, if you can.
We've done some indicative analysis, as Mr Jaggers indicated. We'll take on notice where that can be made available to the committee.
Now, because this is proposed to be a public-private partnership for the tolling of commercial vehicles, or at least a certain amount of the freight fleet, does that mean we should expect that a lot more of the underpinning modelling and assumptions behind this project will be considered commercial in confidence, because you're in, or not you, but the West Australian government's going to be in negotiations with a commercial partner?
I believe that's correct, Senator.
So there's the first problem right there. If it's a taxpayer-funded project, we can ask you here, you've got no legitimate reasons to deny us that information. As soon as it becomes a public-private partnership, it all goes behind the firewall of commercial in confidence. So that's our first problem.
Well, certainly details need to be released to the market with a PPP in a consistent and considered manner. So there's accuracy in that information, and the market can respond, because the market will be spending, presumably, money to bid for these particular projects. So there does need to be some careful consideration of the commercial impacts of the project.
And the commercial impacts, as far as the state government's concerned, will outweigh the public interest in knowing whether this controversial project goes ahead or not, and whether the assumptions behind it are utterly flaky or not. That's something of a problem for us. When you say you're modelling the traffic assumptions, does that mean you're critiquing the effort that the state government put in, or do you do your own modelling and then see whether the two models stack up next to each other?
Well, it's a bit of both, Senator. So the state have been doing their own work, and of course we've been doing some work as well. We'll share that information with them at the appropriate times, and have a discussion about the details of that work.
When's that expected to be concluded, or at least that portion of the process?
Well, I'd expect as they work towards a business case that would make our information available to them, so that they have that, and we'll be reviewing the information as it comes through. So it may be a matter of months, Senator.
Months, that's what it sounded like. Okay. Can you confirm I think this is uncontroversial, the announcement that there are intended to be no traffic lights at all on the Perth Freight Link? So you could take it all the way from Kewdale, all the way to the Port of Fremantle without a single set of traffic lights?
Well, certainly to the end of the project, which ends at which ends at High Street, where the High Street connects to what was it? No, Canning, to that point at the end of High Street.
And then you've got a whole bank of traffic lights. You've got, I think, 5 or 6 in a row before you actually get to the outer harbour, or to the North Mole.
There are a couple of lights after that work.
That's where I live. Okay.
Yep.
So no traffic lights at all until you hit that big sweeping bend at the High Street end.
In fact, I think, Senator, that High Street interchange will also not have a traffic light under the current proposal.
Where High Street hits the bottom end of Stirling Highway?
Yes, Senator.
And Senator, if I may, Roland Pittard, General Manager of North West Roads. I understand too that the where Stirling Highway crosses Marmion Street, there'll be no lights there either.
Fly over there, or how are people going to get over Marmion Street?
Grade separation.
Grade separation there too.
Quick and the dead. Does grade separation mean, for the purpose of local residents, does that mean a flyover or a cloverleaf, or what does it actually look like?
Well, there are different ways of separating it. So you can separate it by a road going being sunken,
yep,
and a wall going over.
Yep. Will you still be able to get onto that freight link from Marmion Street, or will that access be closed off?
There would be local access movements as well. So the intention would be, in broad terms, to separate freight movements and separate local traffic.
Okay, sounds like you're going to close off Marmion Street, which the locals might be delighted by. I don't know. It's either that or a cloverleaf, or how to get people onto that road.
Also, the details.
Is there a plan? Is there a plan that we can see?
There's a broad schemata, that's all that's been released.
Oh, what, sorry?
A broad schemata or map that has been released. The details of each intersection are still to be settled.
So there's nowhere we could go to a website and say this is the plan?
Not at this stage, but you'd expect that once the business case is settled, that there'd be, obviously there's a strong period of public consultation still required on this project. And
no, come on, give us a break.
Details...
The decision's been made. If I'm a member of the public, why would I turn up to your consultation? You've already made your minds up.
Senator,
you've committed $1 billion in funding.
Just thinking the timing.
Yeah, certainly, Senator Stowe. I'll move along. Let's get on to the toll. The toll, which came completely out of the blue, like pokies, toll roads are one of those things from the East Coast that we're quite happy not to have infect Western Australia.
I like pokies.
Nonetheless, this is a toll initially only for freight vehicles. I might flip this to you, Senator Johnston, because I guess it's a question of policy rather than implementation. What kind of commitments have you made that toll would never be applied to non-freight traffic?
Look, I'm not aware of that, but I think the issue of tolls is a matter for the Western Australian state government.
No, you guys made that one up. That came from you.
Sorry?
That wasn't a West Australian initiative. This wasn't going to proceed at all.
Well, it's a matter for WA as to how they domestically manage the traffic and who pays.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. What are you going to do to prevent people from simply avoiding the toll? Will you be closing off other roads as happened in New South Wales, around Cross City Tunnel, for example? How are you going to prevent people just avoiding paying the toll?
Well, Senator, there's a number of mechanisms that the state is able to use to reduce leakage of heavy vehicles off the main thoroughfare, the Perth Freight Link.
That's cute. And one of those techniques is blocking alternate routes, blocking other local roads.
Well, it can be done a number of ways, including by charging people who are leaving the road and then re-entering. There are a range of ways that it can be enforced. There's a number of projects in Australia where the same issue is an issue.
Yeah, it certainly was an issue.
So it needs to be part of the resolution to the project.
Why would I not just stay on High Street if I'm bringing my truck out from the freight yards in Kewdale to the port? Why would I pay you a toll at all?
Well, there are
other jurisdictions have utilised mechanisms such as defining heavy vehicle corridors and requiring operations by regulatory requirements to stay on certain roads. That way it shifts heavy vehicles to dedicated freight corridors.
You aware that at the time this announcement was made, the West Australian Freight and Logistics Council said they'd never heard of it. Do you have any idea what consultation was done either by yourselves or by the state government before this thing hit the headlines?
Well, this project was certainly developed from advice from the West Australian Government in relation to how we could improve access to the port. This has been a process that's been developed for some time by the West Australian Government, I think.
Okay.
And certainly, the Australian Government is very focused on trying to lift productivity of access to the port.
No money around it.
I'm not sure how you will do that when you're still going to have a choke point of, I forget exactly how many it is, 5 or 6 sets of traffic lights between High Street and Tideman Road before you actually get to the container port. Aren't we just shunting a hideous bottleneck further up into North Fremantle? And will your traffic modelling identify that if that's the case?
Well, if that's the case, I don't necessarily agree with your assertion. I don't understand enough of the modelling at this stage. But
you
if
make
the
those roads wider, or?
Well, that's work that'll be underway to make sure we don't end up shifting a problem elsewhere.
But you will.
The focus here is trying to get a much more efficient access into the Fremantle port.
You will be getting much more efficient access until the point where you hit the first set of traffic lights on Tideman Road or maybe just before you get to the bridge, and then it's going to be an utter nightmare.
Senator Ludlam, I'm on tune with you on this, but can I ask how much longer you've got?
I
Because there
could
was
go
a
this for
arrangement
hours and hours.
for
I
20
was at a
minutes.
public meeting the other night that they didn't have enough room. It wasn't even standing room only. We couldn't fit enough people in the room. People demanding to know how this thing got into the Commonwealth budget without any traffic modelling being completed, without a business case, without environmental and heritage assessment being done. And you haven't provided us with anything except, you can't even provide us with a map.
Senator, I think a map has been provided and been released of the route, and I would say that the components of this project, like the Row 8 extension, are not new ideas. Neither are the Stock Road or High Street projects.
I will agree with you on that. They're old ideas that should have been put to rest 20 years ago.
Well, that's a matter of political opinion.
Okay.
Yep, strong political opinion as it happens, Senator Johnson.
Senator Ludlam, before I go...
See you on the barricades. Thank you, Senator Sterl.
That's pretty fighting words then.